Alright, hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Mr. Ade Arobet Predict. So in today's video, don't forget, I promise you guys that I'm going to drop a very big odds in the next video. Now right now I have amazing odds for you guys under this particular betting strategy in football. The betting strategy of any team to score 3 goals in a row, either yes or no, or to predict any teams, maybe particular teams, maybe home teams or away teams, to score goals in a row. So now I'll be first, I would like to display some odds for you guys in this particular video. So first we are going for the small odds, and these small odds will be around maybe 1.7 odds and 2 odds before we move on to the 8,000 odds under this particular same betting strategy. So the first thing that I always look into is that I always try to check the last previous games of the teams that I want to predict my games on. So for example, this particular match between Canada and Chile, I decided to remove it because of what? I realized that in the last previous games they have not been playing any, they haven't played any games against each other before, but except that they've played games with other teams, and that alone cannot be considered as for the start. So now checking the match between Jamaica and Venezuela, so checking their last previous games, we can see that the goal difference of 3 goals is not that very common there. It's not that very common. So now checking their last previous games against each other, we can see that the highest goal difference that they can have there happens to be 2-0, and we can see that in the last previous games both teams have been performing so well. So I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to check the match between Mexico and Ecuador. So I will check the last previous games that they've had with other teams. In the particular match, Mexico lost to Uruguay by 4 goals to nothing. Okay, and checking the away team also, we realize that their goal difference there is not that very common, up to 3 goals. And checking their last previous games against each other, we can see that they don't really have a goal difference that are much like that. So I'm going to leave that, and we are moving to Bolivia and Panama. So in the last game of Bolivia, we can see that they lost to Uruguay by 5 goals to nothing, and some other games like that whereby they lost by 3 goals to nothing. So we have, for the away team, we can see that in the last previous games they don't have a goal difference that is even up to 3 goals. And now let us check the match against each other that they've had. We can see that their start is actually very good because they don't have much goal difference there. So actually I would have said that I should leave these particular games in the tickets. So we are leaving Jamaica, we are leaving Mexico. For both Bolivia and Panama, I'm removing it because the home team, which happens to be Bolivia, they are not always in form with the way I want it, because they are losing games with a very large margin. Now let us check USA and Uruguay. So checking USA and Uruguay, we can see that the away team, which happens to Uruguay, they have the ability to score goals and to create gap and margin in their goal difference. Now checking their last previous games against each other, we can see that they played straight draws, but unfortunately it's supposed to be partial, but I'm going to remove it. So actually sometimes when we have a partial stats that want to meet the analysis, sometimes I always want to think of leaving it, but sometimes they can cost us. Now let us check the match between Costa Rica and Paraguay. Checking the last previous games, we can see that we have some games that ended up as 0-3, 4-0, and for the away team we also have games that ended up as 3-0. Now checking the last previous games against each other, we can see that it's like they don't really score goals against, like the margin of their goals against each other is not that very much. But unfortunately I don't think leaving this is actually fine, but for me I think I'm going to leave it for now, because if you check it very well, straight draw is very common in their games. And now going to Brazil and Colombia. Okay, Brazil and Colombia, their goal difference against each other is not always that very large. The margin of their goal is not always that very much. Sometimes when you check the analysis of your the teams that you want to predict your 3 goals, any team to score 3 goals, you need to consider the last previous games against each other, their ability to score and their defense, and so looking into their last previous games, except in a match that Brazil, the away team won by 5 goals to 1. So there, and in total of this particular odd, we are having 1.72 odd for this alone. I'm going to show you guys the code. Yes, I'm going to show you guys the code. This is 1.72. So now let's see the code. So this is the code. Just 4 games. We have just 4 games at odd of 1.72 odds. So after this, I will be loading another code now, and we are going to be doing the editing on it. So before I drop the odd for that 8,000 odds, which happens to be that you guys will be the one responsible for the editing. So this particular game happens to have we are currently having 11 odds right now, and I'm going to quickly run the editing of it by removing some games that are not supposed to be here. So now let's start with Switzerland and Italy. Let's first start with Switzerland and Italy. So by checking their head to head, we can see that the common things that occurs in Switzerland games happens to be straight draw. And checking the away team games, we can see that the margin of their goals are not always that very much. So checking the last previous games against each other, we see that draw, straight draw is a very common thing, except in a match whereby Italy won by 3 goals to nothing. Yeah, actually, I like this particular start because it's partially okay. Now let us check the Germany, the German starts, the German and Denmark starts. We can see that in their last previous games, they only won a particular match by 5 goals to 1, which happens to be the only biggest margin that they have. Yeah, and checking the last previous games of the away team, we can see that they don't really have a very good or a large margin of goals. And checking the match against each other, we can see that they don't always even have margin of goals. So I'm leaving that. Now moving on to England and Slovakia. Checking the stats for the England and Slovakia, for the home team, we can see that they only had 3 goals to nothing by winning 3 goals to nothing in a single match. But for the away team, we can see that they are winning games with a very large margin of goals. And the match against each other, I think margin of goals is not that very common there. But unfortunately, I'm not really in support of their stats. I am not so in good. I don't have a good feelings about these particular games, but let's see how it goes, because we have the odd for that as 1.28 odd, but I'm going to remove that. So we have the match between France and Belgium. Now let's quickly check the stats for that also. We are checking the head to head, whereby we'll be checking the last 5 games of the home team and the away team. And checking this, you can see that the home team had a win with 3 goals to nothing, and for the away team also, they only had a particular match that ended up with a win of 3 goals to nothing. But checking the last previous games against each other, we can see that the margin of goals is not that very much. So we are going to consider France and Belgium and leave it like that. And for the Portugal and Slovenia, looking at it very well, we can see that Portugal are really performing so well in this particular tournament. And checking the last previous games of the away team, we can see that the margin of goals there is not that very much. But unfortunately, checking the last previous meeting against each other, we can see that they only had one match that they played against each other, which ended up as 2-0 against Portugal, whereby Portugal lost to this particular Slovenia by 2 goals to nothing. But I'm removing it because that is not providing us enough data to conclude on the margin of goals. Maybe they are going to score 3 goals in a row or not. Now we have Romania and Netherlands, and looking at it very well, for the home team they had 3 wins to 0. But checking the last previous game, this is an automatic for me, automatic remover for me, because if we check the last previous games against each other, we can see some games that ended up as 4-0 and many more like that. So we have Austria and Turkey, okay. And checking the last previous games with other teams, we can see that the margin of goals is not that very common. And but checking the last previous games against each other, we have a match that ended up as 6-1. That one scares me. In the last games, they had a match that ended up as 6-1. And for the away team, we can see that one of the match for the away team actually ended up at 0-3. So for me, I think Austria and Turkey should not be here. Now we have Jamaica and Venezuela. We already examined that, I think, the other time. So we go for Brazil. Okay, Brazil, we examined it the other time also. We also examined Mexico the other time. We have Bolivia. I think we removed Bolivia the other time. So we have Spain and Georgia. Wow. If you check Spain and Georgia very well, you can see that the odd for that happens to be 1.58. That is, anything to score 3 goals or more in a row. No. Actually, let me explain this particular any team to score 3 goals in a row, which is no. It means that no teams will score 3 goals in a row before. For example, let's say Spain happens to score 2 goals and their opponent scored the third goal and Spain later won the match by 3 goals to 1. You have won the game. But if Spain played 3-0 straight up, my people, we've lost. But however, let's check the stats. We can see that Spain are scoring goals and are giving their opponent a very big margins. For me, this particular game, we need to remove Spain because they are scoring goals with margin in this particular tournament, and some people were not really expecting that. So in total now we have 2.33 odds for this particular ticket. With just 6 games, we have 2.33 odds. Now this is the code for that, and now we'll be moving on. After this, we'll be moving on to the odd of the 8,000 odds for this particular same strategy of any team to score 3 goals in a row, yes or no. As you guys are seeing on the screen, we are currently having 8,692 odds on the screen right now, and the total number of the games constituted happens to be 46. We have 46 games to So we have 46, and for us to be editing this particular 46 games in today's video, it may be stressful and it may take a lot of our time. I believe you guys have seen some factors that I'm considering and how I'm editing some of these particular games, so you guys can also apply the same to this particular big odds. Actually, I want you guys to always note that no strategy is always 100%, so make sure that you gamble responsibly, and also you know engage in responsible gambling. So now this is the odd for this particular big odds. You can find some of the games that you are seeing on the screen. You can find some of them on maybe Sweden League, maybe Japan League, maybe Korean League, and so many more like that, and even on Premier League. So guys, thanks for watching. If you are just joining us, make sure that you subscribe to this particular channel